Hey Wolfpack, and welcome back. How are you doing and how was your week? It's been very hectic since I've been moving around, but I am finally in my new office and I love it. I am wicked excited to get to 20,000 subscribers. You all have been a great community coming together, and I can't wait to see the future of this channel. With that said, today we're reading 3 scary Craigslist stories. I know you guys absolutely love dark web, Craigslist, and so I am trying my best to find more dark web stories. If you see any that I haven't done, please email them to me. My email is down in the description below. With that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. I thought it was just a prank at first. Just a belated April Fool's joke from one of my buddies. I never thought for a second that it could have spiraled into this horrifying mess I found myself in. The thick stone ceiling above me has made calling the cops impossible, but I think I have just enough signal to get this out to the internet. My note in a bottle, if you will. There are no clocks here, but as far as I can tell, this all started a few hours ago. I sat hunched over my computer desk, squinting at the harsh blue light of my monitor. I was going through my nightly routine of scanning through Craigslist for any good deals. I was moments away from powering the computer down and giving my tired brain a break when I saw it. The image was so surreal. It took me a moment to figure out what I was looking at. There, nestled between a vintage typewriter and an old, dusty sofa, was a picture of me. The title was my full name, and the price was listed at $1,500. I mentally went through all my friends and family, trying to figure out who would do something like this, but came up empty-handed. I saw there were more pictures and went to scroll through them, but I hesitated. I was afraid that I'd be met with the fuzzy Polaroids of me taken from behind bushes and through windows. However, as I scrolled through the images, I realized I recognized each one. I'd taken them. They were all from my Facebook feed. A selfie I'd taken with some friends at a bar. A picture of me at the beach with my girlfriend. I felt my heart rate begin to quicken. My Facebook was set to private, and I never friended anyone I didn't know. How had these pictures gotten onto the internet? I clicked the listing and began anxiously reading the description. Product is a 26-year-old Caucasian male. It is 237 pounds and 5 foot 8 inches. It consumes approximately 2,200 calories per day. I raised an eyebrow at that last line. What would anyone want with that information? It went on to describe everything I'd eaten for the past 2 weeks in meticulous detail. Everything from the McGriddle I'd had on my way to work to the Snickers I'd munched on today after dinner. They even knew about my ADD medication. I nervously glanced around my house, suddenly feeling naked and vulnerable. Where were they getting this information from? How long have they been keeping tabs on me? Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I saw a short message at the end of the post that made my skin crawl. Product is unathletic and should be easily collected by 2 to 3 people. Bringing weapons are suggested, but not needed. Collected? Any hope of this being a joke was beginning to evaporate. How many people had seen this listing by now? What kinds of people go searching for a listing like this at all? Then, I had a thought that made me bring a hand to my mouth. Did this page have my address listed? It seemed terrifyingly possible. The listing had seemingly every other detail about me. Why not that? My eyes scanned the webpage until I found a message that explained everything. Address for $1,500. Email me if interested. It made a sick sort of sense. They'd found a way to monetize their stalking. Why let such great talent go to waste, right? I wondered how many other people had he done this to. How many home invasions and robberies and abductions he'd helped facilitate just for a few $1,000. I immediately flagged the post, hoping to have it taken down. However, I quickly realized it would take hours, maybe even days for the moderators at Craigslist to get to it. I didn't have that time to spare. My fingers flew across the keyboard, searching Google for some way to get a hold of the people at Craigslist, but in the end, all I could find was a generic contact form. Getting desperate, I opened my email to try one last gambit. I plugged in the seller's address, a random string of numbers and letters, and typed out a desperate plea to take down the listing, offering 5 times the original price. Waiting for a response was torture. I passed the time by running around my house, locking all the doors and windows. I also turned out all of the lights to make it look like no one was home. I knew, realistically, the odds of some psycho seeing the post was slim, but the internet was a big place, and I didn't want to take any chances. I was so on edge that by the time I heard the ding of the email notification, my heart practically jumped out of my chest. I regret to inform you that the information has already been purchased. I buried my head in my hands. I had been too late. How long ago had it been bought? 10 minutes ago? An hour? A day? My line of thought was broken when the crackle of wheels on gravel brought my attention to the window. I pulled the curtains aside and peered out into the night, careful to reveal as little of myself as possible. A black SUV was pulling into my driveway, its occupants hidden by a dark window. I told myself everything was fine, that they were just doing a 3-point turn and would be gone any minute. However, instead of driving away, the doors popped open in unison. 2 figures emerged from the car, dressed head to toe in black. I wanted to turn and run, but fear had paralyzed me. I watched helplessly as the men marched up to the front door and knocked loudly. I realized that then their plan must have been to wait for me to answer the door and drag me to their car, but I knew better. I began calling 911, cursing myself for not doing it sooner. The door was heavy oak and would take them at least a minute or 2 to kick down. That's when I heard it. There was a strange beeping sound coming from the other side of the door. After racking my brain for a few moments, I figured out what it was. It was the beeping of my door's keypad. They couldn't possibly know the code, could they? Then, it dawned on me. The creep who'd post the listing knew everything about me. Of course, they knew the passcode. My blood ran cold, and I dashed away from the door, looking for a place to hide. Click. The door unlocked. I ducked behind a corner into the kitchen, just as it began to slowly creak open. The back door was at the other side of the kitchen, and I began creeping toward it, grateful I'd turned the lights out earlier. The 2 men cautiously stepped into the living room, talking in hushed voices about where I might be. I had almost made it to the back door when I bumped into the kitchen table. I cursed myself for not seeing it. Their whispers immediately stopped, and they began marching towards me, forcing me to improvise a hiding place. I slipped into my kitchen's pantry and shut the door just as the light clicked on. The men, apparently no longer concerned with stealth, began stomping around the kitchen, looking for me. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed they didn't look inside, knowing I'd be completely helpless if they did. I bit down on my knuckles, and the time seemed to stretch out forever. But they eventually left, going deeper into the house to search for me. I let out a sigh of relief. Buzz. My phone was ringing in my pocket. I took it out, and it was my girlfriend, Lexi. My eyes widened. Lexi. She'd be home any minute. What if the men decided to take her instead? I answered the call. "Hey, you," she said. "Lexi, don't come in the house. It's not safe." "Oh my God, where are you?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "I'm hiding in the pantry. I think I'm safe for now, but..." The line went dead. I felt my heart sink. Had they gotten to her already? Had I not warned her in time? Then, I heard some strange vibrating noise in the room over. One of the men's phones was ringing. He answered it and listened a moment. His voice was raspy and muffled. "He's where?" Another pause. Then, footsteps thundering straight towards me. My mind raced momentarily, and then it hit me. The one who had posted the listing hadn't been stalking me. They had been living with me. Lexi was the one who posted it. And she just told them exactly where I was. I burst out of the pantry and made a break for the door, just as the 2 men rounded the corner behind me. I wanted to look back, but fought the urge. If I looked back, I'd get nervous, and if I got nervous, I'd stumble, and if I stumbled, they'd drag me into the car and do God knows what. I flung open the back door and ran into the cool, damp air. However, before I could make a break for it, one of them caught me by the hood, snapping my neck back. The fabric tightened around my throat like a snake, making it very hard to breathe. I blindly threw an elbow behind me, and it connected with his ribs. The man cried out in pain, and I felt his grip loosen by just a fraction. A fraction was all I needed. I tucked in my chin, drew in my arms, and wriggled out of the hoodie. Falling to the wet earth on hands and knees, I made a mad dash for the tree line. As I ran, I heard angry shouts from behind me. "Just shoot! The damn thing is jammed! Oh, give me that!" A loud pop rang out into the night, and something whizzed past my ear. I wondered if they'd shot at me. The sound was too quiet to be a gun. A quick glance behind me revealed one of the men was holding what looked like a small, lightweight sniper rifle. It was green with a strange white chamber at the bottom. What the hell is that thing? The man shoved something inside, clicked it back, and took aim. Pop. Fear shot through me like a bolt of electricity. I jerked my body out of the way just in time for something to fly past me and bury itself in a nearby tree. It was a dart. They were shooting at me with a tranquilizer gun, like I was a wild animal. The tree line was about 40 feet away now. My lungs felt like they were full of bees, but I kept running anyways, knowing if I slowed down even a fraction, they'd catch me. I did my best to avoid the darts, diving out of the way whenever I heard one of those sickening pops, but eventually, my luck ran out. Just as I reached the tree line, ready to disappear behind the dense foliage, I felt a red-hot sting in my back. Exhaustion began flooding my body, making my movements slow and sluggish. The world spun around me, and soon, I found myself on the forest floor. My memories of what happened next are jagged and frayed. The click of a trunk and jangle of chains. When I finally came to my senses, I found myself on a damp, concrete floor, bathed in darkness, shivering from the biting cold. The only noise breaking the eerie silence was the heavy thuds of footsteps over my head. They left me my phone, maybe to keep me from going crazy, or maybe to taunt me. To ensure I can't ask for help, they've somehow blocked all posting or messaging features, at least almost all of them. No Sleep is the only place that I can post. At first, I thought they made a mistake. I thought maybe this subreddit had just slipped past them. But now, I'm starting to realize it's because they think no one will believe me. But that can't be true. At least one of you has to believe me, right? I was absolutely strapped for cash. I mean, what more can I say? I had just gotten kicked out of my mother's house. Granted, I was 25 with no job, and I was desperate for cash at the time. I didn't want to be the guy working minimum wage jobs for the rest of his life. I didn't want to make enough to barely support myself. What was I to do? In hindsight, I probably should have just started there and worked my way up. Like, you know, a normal person. Well, I decided to do some freelancing. It paid pretty good, and I could pick up my own jobs. I felt pretty confident that I could make enough to start getting an actual education other than a high school diploma. What better place to look than on Craigslist, right? No, wrong. I did it anyways, though. One night, while scrolling through the jobs section of Craigslist, I stumbled upon an ad for help tending on a farm. It provided living quarters, free meals, and the best part, money. The ad was written by a man who said he had inherited a farm, but he was getting too old to tend to the animals and crops as efficiently as he once used to. The pay was extremely good, and I had a place to stay, basically rent-free. After about 2 hours of deliberation, I decided to go ahead and send him an email. I explained I only needed this temporarily, as I was saving money for school. I told him I could be a reliable worker, but only for about 6 months. I didn't really expect an answer back, as he probably wanted something longer or more permanent. It only took about 15 minutes before I received a response. I sent the email at 2 a.m. I'll admit, I was a little off-put by the speedy reply, especially since it was the middle of the night. I figured he'd be sleeping. Anyways, The email he sent was pretty short and to the point. He explained any help was good enough, and he said he'd be ready for my arrival the following day. He left the address and his phone number. The next morning, I packed everything I wanted to take, told my mother I was leaving for a job and I'd stay in contact, and headed out to the farm. When I arrived, he was nothing like I had imagined. He was tall and fairly overweight. He had a beard that wasn't quite full, but still enough to be called a beard, I guess. His eyes were dark, like really dark. I could barely make out his pupils. Upon approaching him with my bags, he reached out to me. I dropped my bags and shook his hand. It felt a little forced. It wasn't a very friendly handshake, to be honest. It was firm, almost gripping. He let go, and I felt my arm fall to my side. He asked me to hurry in, so I did. He quickly showed me up to my room and asked me if I could start right away. Flustered, I dropped my belongings in my room and threw my phone and keys on the bed. I quickly changed my pants and jeans, and then put on some old shoes. I walked out into the main hall. He stood there, almost mannequin-like. When we locked eyes, he started telling me my tasks. I was to tend to the field 3 times a day. He said he had plowed over the land to start anew. He was planting corn, and a lot of it. He claimed he was going to sell and distribute the corn to local grocery stores. I asked about the animals, and he said there were none. Before I could ask anything further, he cut me off and threw me a shovel. He asked me to fill in holes throughout the farm before he could till the land. I took the shovel and hurried out of the door. Staring at him was uncomfortable. I was tired. I had barely slept the night before. Hell, I had sent the email the night before. This all felt like a whirlwind, but all I thought about was the money. I knew in my gut this wasn't right, but I really, really needed this. The farm was huge. At the end of the field, you couldn't even see the house anymore. I know because I had to walk to the whole way through it to fill in the holes. Holes I never found, by the way, until the edge of the farm. It was surrounded in thick forest. I knew it was a rural area, but I didn't realize the farm was basically a one-way in, one-way out kind of deal. The forest was dense. You'd get lost in a matter of seconds if you weren't paying attention. When I reached the very end of the farm, I noticed only one hole, and about 14 other already filled-in holes. Why would he send me out here over a mile away to fill in one hole? I felt uneasy about the whole thing. As I started to fill in the hole, which was about 10 feet deep, I couldn't stop glancing over at the already filled-in, disturbed ground. After I filled in about 2 feet worth of dirt, my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to dig into one of the already filled holes. These were not small holes. They were wide and about 12 feet in length. They were big enough to fit a deceased cow. Hell, maybe even 2. I had already figured out what that case was, considering there weren't any animals. I'm glad I went with my gut. It didn't take much digging to reach the first, weird object. It was a wallet. I picked it up and opened it, but it wasn't completely empty. I tossed it to the side and kept digging. That's when I saw a hint of red fabric. I couldn't tell right away what it was. It could have been an animal wrapped in a blanket. It's safe to say I was heading into denial. It was only about 4 feet down when I discovered the body. Her body was in bad shape, but she wasn't decomposing. All of the trauma she went through was clear on her skin. I knelt down and felt her body. She was cold. I sat there for a couple of minutes just staring at her. Once I realized that her time of death had to be within the last 48 hours, I ran to the nearest tree and vomited. I didn't even bother filling in the hole I was supposed to, but I reburied the girl. Her body didn't deserve to be exposed like that. I threw the wallet into an entrance of the woods near the graves. I figured the police would find it, even if he were to try and hide the bodies better. After that, I ran. I felt like an Olympic athlete. It was starting to get dark, and I had to make it back before then, or I'd be wandering around this field for hours. The last thing I wanted was to be hunted down like an animal in the pitch black. I knew that's what he was going to do. He knew filling the hole would have taken until dark. Once I reached the house, I finally stopped to catch my breath. I know I had to remain composed, or he would know. I regulated my breathing and walked in. He was sitting at the dining table to the left of the house. I couldn't exactly tell what he was doing, but once he heard me open the front door, his head swung around so fast I thought he'd snap his neck. He looked at me like a deer in the headlights. It was obvious he hadn't expected me back so soon. "You're done?" I could tell he was trying everything in his power to remain calm. "I got sick. I had to come back. I'll go back out to finish it. I just have to use the bathroom." I tried to sound as nonchalant as I could, but I knew he could tell I was lying. After looking me up and down, he said, "Okay then, get back to it. I want it done by tonight." I shook my head and hurried to my room. I took the clothes I had taken off when I arrived and shoved them into my suitcase. I was so happy I hadn't unpacked yet. I grabbed my phone, but my keys were gone. Frantic, I started looking for them as quietly as possible. He took them, and I knew it. My original plan was to run in, grab my things, and book it the hell out of there, which is pretty hard to do with no keys. I sat on the bed for a moment. My phone had no signal, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I started going through my pictures. If I was going to die, I wanted to see my friends and family one more time, even if it was just over a phone screen. It felt like enough. That's when I stumbled upon my 23rd birthday party, when my mother had gifted me my car as a present. I stood proudly by my car, with a set of keys in each hand. I had 2 sets. I didn't know why it didn't dawn on me earlier. I never used them, but I always carried them in case I locked myself out of my car. I unzipped my suitcase and pulled everything out of it. At the very bottom was my second set of keys. They must have been the first thing I threw in while packing. It was a mindless habit at that point, and in that moment, I couldn't have been more proud of myself. I decided to say screw the clothes and grabbed my phone and keys. I peeked out of the bedroom and walked to the bathroom. It wasn't hard to act ill because I was already nauseated from sheer terror and anxiety. I tried to make over-exaggerated gagging sounds, but eventually threw up. It wasn't my intention, but it made it more realistic. I rinsed out my mouth and stuck my phone and keys into the side of my pants. I made sure they weren't obvious and headed back out to the main area. Still sitting at the dining table, I told him I was ready to finish the work. He nodded, and I walked out. I started walking towards the farm again because when I looked behind me, he was watching me through the window. I walked slow, and once he wasn't watching anymore, I fled to my car. He heard my frantic running and bolted outside. By then, I was already in my car and pulling out. He started to sprint full speed at me, and I floored it. I heard 2 gunshots ring out, and I felt a slight impact as one of the bullets shot through the passenger seat. I sped until I felt safe. It had taken me 4 hours to get there and about 2 to get home. I immediately went to my mother's and told her everything. Turns out, there were 52 bodies discovered on the farmland when I reported what had happened to the authorities. They conducted a thorough search of the whole farm. Many missing persons cases that went cold throughout the years were coming to light. The only thing they didn't find was him. I look every few months to see if they finally have a lead, but they never do. The name he had given me was fake, and the phone number was that of a burner phone. I don't have any pictures of him. I described him to a sketch artist, and that was about it. Although I saw online that there's a farm on the west coast, pays well, living expenses taken care of, and free meals, it's run by some old man who says the work is just too much to handle by himself. It seems too good to be true. The similarities are eerie. I know you might need the money, but I wouldn't go if I were you. The Craigslist ad read, "Lifeguard for swimming pool. Clean the goddamn dishes!" My drunk mom yelled from across the living room, startling me. I had been on my phone searching for Craigslist job ads. Hell, I had been for the past 2 weeks. My mom had been depressed and turned to drugs and alcohol. Why, you may ask? Well, my dad passed away not long ago. She had gotten fired from her job and hadn't found a new one. That's when all the pressure was turned on me. If my estimates were correct, we would be evicted within several months. I needed a way to pay the bills, the rent, the food, and my mom's whiskey all at once. Not only that, but I needed to find a way to pay my college tuition. Now, before I start, I want to clarify things. This took place in 2019, so don't come and murder me for not wearing a mask. And also, though I doubt anyone will believe me, I know what I saw. As I said, I was looking for a job. I didn't want to work at the McDonald's down the street since I'd work non-stop and get minimum wage. Neither did I want to work at the nearby factory, since I'd also probably get lung cancer before I'd be able to pay off my debt. After cleaning the dishes and taking out my mom's half-empty bottles of whiskey, I went back to Craigslist. I opened up the description of the job I mentioned earlier and I read it. The job itself sounded decent. All I needed to know was to swim, and it was close enough to where I wouldn't have to take the bus. The pay was a little over the minimum wage. However, there was one odd thing. At the end of the description, it read, "If you're sensitive about the supernatural, this job is not for you." I thought this was just some joke for the new guy, so I went along with it. Life continued on as usual, as I kept busy with my mom's breakdowns and episodes. I know, worst Groundhog Day imaginable. 5 days later, I received an email saying that I had gotten the job. I mean, I couldn't be mad. The pay was good and I was willing to work there. But I felt as if they were hiding something from me. Hiding something that shouldn't be known to humankind. I should have listened to my gut feeling. On Monday, I got on my bike and sped off. It was already sunset when I got there, but I didn't worry, since I was told to come at that hour. Either way, I thought the job was odd because the pool was about to close. Without giving it a second thought, I casually walked into the indoor swimming pool. Strangely enough, the building was vacant. No people, no signs of them, and the deafening silence. Already weirded out, I changed into my lifeguard uniform and headed towards the lifeguard stand. When I got there, I noticed the note besides the chair. Looking back at the large pool, I noticed the sun had long set and the night had settled over the building. "How the hell?" I managed to say. I had only been there for about 20 minutes, but it was already dark outside. I stared at the gentle waves of the pool for another minute before recomposing myself. I turned back to the stand and read the note. The note read, "Hello. As we know, you will be the lifeguard for this pool. I know you might have many questions, but this is the introduction. If you survive this night, your pay will increase tenfold. Now, here are the directions. If you notice time seems to go fast, remember that. You'll need that knowledge for later. If you see a blood-red moon, make sure you turn off all the lights. You will also need to make sure this phenomenon is not occurring. If you notice a dark spot at the deep end of the pool at exactly 11:20 p.m., close your eyes and count to 30. If you hear splashes at the 20-second mark, put your hands to your eyes. At 11:35 p.m., lock the doors to all the entrances to the pool. You will likely hear banging and the voices of your loved ones pleading from the other sides of the doors, but do not open the door. Only unlock the doors once the banging and pleading stops. If you do not hear the banging or the pleads, run. Use the emergency exit and run. At midnight, a young girl will come up to you and ask you for your help, but whatever you do, do not follow the girl. You do not want to know what happens if you follow her. At exactly 1:36 a.m. in the morning, a group of people will walk through the doors and go into the pool. Then, at approximately 2:03 p.m., one of the swimmers will dive into the deep end. He will not come back up to the surface of the pool. The other swimmers will panic and run out of the building. If the swimmer returns to the surface, act as if you don't notice him. If you make eye contact with him, it's already too late. At 2:25 a.m., you will go into the manager's office and lock the door. Do not look out of the window if you hear screaming coming from the pool, and if you hear chanting coming from the other side of the door, pray to God that it ends. If you hear screams and growling, that's normal. Then, at 2:35 a.m., you will unlock the door and exit the manager's office. Once you get back to the stand, watch the pool intently. If you see something odd happening at the shallow end of the pool, Walk to the area of the pool. Act as intimidating and imposing as possible, since you don't want it to get you. At 2:55 a.m., run back into the manager's office. Go under the desk and cover your eyes. Make sure you're hidden so the warden can't see you. Now, if you felt as time seemed to be accelerating at the beginning, chant, "The spirits of the night, we have come to forgive you. We are here to offer you the sacrifice." If you saw the blood moon, go into the bunker. The bunker is located under the front desk. The keys will be on the hook next to the front desk. Only retreat from your hideaway at 5 p.m. Once you retreat, immediately exit the building. As we said, if you survive the first night, your pay will increase. Make sure you follow all of our rules and precautions for your safety. Once all the directions above are completed, you have finished your job. Good luck. I was a bit weirded out. I had never been a believer of the supernatural or gods. This absolutely had to be a prank. But I couldn't help but notice the dark spot forming at the deep end of the pool. I watched in amazement and fear as the dark spot swirled and started coming towards the surface of the water. This had to be a prank. This just had to be, I thought. But the dark spot looked unnatural. Already unnerved, I decided to close my eyes. Call me a wimp, but I did. All the while my emotions and thoughts were racing. I was pissed at the prank. But deep down, I felt like this was not a prank. Luckily, I never heard the splashing. When I opened my eyes, the dark spot was gone. I rubbed my eyes to confirm this, but there it was. I looked around to see any sign someone was watching, but saw no one. I walked over to the deep end of the pool and inspected the water. No signs of the dark spot or anything out of the ordinary. What happened next gave me a jolt of anxiety and fear. As I inspected the water and looked around the pool, I got the sensation of something off. I checked my watch and nearly fell into the pool as I checked the time. It was 11:34. Reminding myself this was a prank, I calmly walked to the other side of the pool to the doors. I locked the doors and waited to surprise the pranksters. But when I heard what happened next, started making me doubt this was a prank. The screams were deafening. The pleads were of my loved ones and the long-lost ones. I heard the pleads of my dad throughout the yells and bangs. I thought the doors were going to fall off their hinges when the bangs got louder. The bangs sounded like lightning, and I almost believed they were until I looked outside. All I saw was the quiet night air and the soft chirps of crickets. It all happened so quickly. 1 second, I thought my eardrums would explode, and the next was deafening silence. I immediately collapsed to the floor, rolling around in pain as my eardrums rang, and the warm blood trickling down my cheek. I managed to crawl back to my stand and lay my head back on the chair. I was alert now, and ready to run out of there, but my instructions said otherwise. I almost thought I was seeing things from my blood loss when I saw her. The little girl appeared out of nowhere, almost like she had always been there. The girl walked up to my stand and muttered out, "My daddy is hurt. Please help." In an emotionless tone, "Go away, whatever you are," I squeaked out while clutching my ears. "Oh, please, my daddy is really hurt. He needs help. Please help my daddy and save him." I ignored the little girl's pleading as I recovered from my fall and my bleeding ear. "You know what? Where's your dad, little girl?" I said. "He tripped and hit his head there," she replied as she pointed a finger near the entrance to the building. As if on cue, a stream of red liquid, which I presumed to be blood, entered my line of sight. I was almost convinced when I remembered the note. After a while of more begging, the girl simply walked back to where she came from and vanished. When I looked back to where the blood was, I saw nothing. I remember lying there for what felt like days, but was probably just half an hour. I thought of the times I had come to this pool and splashed around, thinking the pool was something to enjoy. I thought the environment was safe and somewhere you could be comfortable, but I learned otherwise the hard way. I felt sick to my stomach as I reflected on what had taken place in the past hours. As I rested and recovered from my injuries, the atmosphere changed. I didn't notice the group of swimmers until they were right in front of me, startling me from my peace. I watched in interest as the group of nearly translucent swimmers headed towards the diving boards. They looked like ghosts, and I suppose they were. But they seemed more real than I thought. I expected a ghostly, misty figure floating around. These looked like perfectly normal swimmers, except for their translucent appearance. After 30 minutes of watching them jump off the boards and swim, one of the swimmers seemed disoriented. He tried to hide it, but it was quite obvious. The other swimmers tried to convince the swimmer to take a break, but he wouldn't listen. Then, as he was about to take his jump off the higher diver board, he suddenly fell unconscious. Unfortunately for him, he fell off the diving boards, plunging into the water below. He disappeared into the water as the other swimmers panicked. One of the swimmers dived to save his friend, but came back empty-handed. He had a look of shock and fear on his face as he re-emerged. Without another word, the swimmer ran out of the building to get help. I was interested, but was fearful because of the message on the note. I reread it and watched in my peripherals as the swimmers emerged from the water. I almost looked before realizing what I was doing. In my peripherals, the swimmer smiled at me and tried to get my attention. I just acted as if he were not there, but in my mind, I was transfixed on him and watching his every move. The translucent swimmer tried to blend in with the water, almost making me think he was gone. Needless to say, that was a close call. After another 20 minutes, the swimmer disappeared under the gentle waves and never re-emerged. After making sure the swimmer was gone, I settled back into my chair and scrolled through my phone, but made sure I kept an eye on the pool. At the exact time of 2:25, I ran over to the manager's office. I took the note along with me to make sure I took all the precautions. When I got to the manager's office, I noticed another note below the desk. If you're still alive, read this note. When you're in the office, make sure you're not facing the window. Also, make sure the things outside don't see you. I know this is the first day on the job, but this is more of a test. Over time, you'll build the strength and become a member. It's not our choice to decide if you will work for our corporation, but even if you quit on the first day, you will receive $5,000 in compensation. We will discuss legal closure once you make it through the night. Make sure to follow the instructions for your safety. I had already decided if I got out of this godforsaken place, I would quit on the spot. I wouldn't be able to endure this on a daily basis. Hell, I had barely made it through the night. So, it was no way I was going to do this one more night. I know it's hard to believe, but all of this was real and happened to me. I myself would think this actually happened if it weren't for my first-hand experience, but stick with me. Now, I know for a fact that demonic entities haunt the indoor swimming pool of this county. As I hid behind the desk, I heard unnatural and horrifying sounds. Just as I locked the door behind me, I heard splashing coming from the pool. Then, an ear-splitting scream erupted from the other side of the door. I quickly hid under the desk and covered my ears to try and block out the noise. However, the noise was replaced with a low and guttural growl, almost the type a werewolf would make. But I didn't dare look out the windows to see the commotion. As I expected, the noises stopped at exactly 3:35. I was surprised at how calm I was with the situation, but even that didn't prepare me for the horrors which ensued just 20 minutes later. As my instructions commanded, I ran back into the manager's office. My anxiety peaked when I heard a groan near the staff-only area, but it was too late. The warden had seen me. I remember running in and frantically hiding under the desk. Then, I heard the sound of glass breaking and metal bending. Then, the warden grabbed me and tossed me out of the office. I landed with a hard thud as my head hit the pavement. I temporarily blacked out. When I came to, I was in an unfamiliar room. Then, I saw the warden again. It was a massive creature that looked like a mix of a dog and a cockroach. It seems funny, but once you see it, you'll know what I mean. It grabbed me and lifted me up. Before it could toss me into the fiery inferno, a beacon light was shined through a window, scaring the hybrid away. It was from one side of the room to the other in less than 5 seconds, which was a 400-foot distance. Then, I blacked out again. 3 days later, I was at the hospital being treated for 3 broken ribs, a mild concussion, a broke arm and wrist, and ruptured eardrums. The injuries were extensive, but I was still thinking about that night. Apparently, I had been found. As a result, the company was forced to pay me $10,000 in compensation and pay my hospital bills. My life was truly changed after that. Even with all the money, things couldn't be repaired. Nothing could. I was forced to sign a deal with the company to never tell anyone about the horrors I witnessed that night. Even if I were to tell someone, they wouldn't believe me. They would just dismiss it as insane ramblings of a teenager. But one thing is clear, I am never going back to that place. Thanks for listening, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your own story, the links for my email and subreddit will be down below. I've also created a Discord, so if you want to join that, the link will be in the description down below as well. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And with that said, have beautiful nightmares, and I will see you next time.